I wonder if our first president ever thought, as he went to bed, that people 250 years in the future would use that slumber as an advertisement. I'll explore that, share about a George Washington whose wife became more famous than he was, and cover a campground in Rhode Island that he never slept at. On this week's Campgrounds with the Yankee Camper, George Washington State Park. Rhode Island is a small state, so it's not surprising that it has only 5 state park campgrounds. Of these, only 3 allow tenting. While George Washington State Park is the largest geographically, comprising over 4,000 acres, it is the smallest campground that allows tenting. Located in the village of Chepachet, part of Gloucester, Rhode Island, the setting is removed from the bustle of oceanfront tourism like Newport. This is an area of natural beauty, focusing on outdoor activities like hiking, fishing, paddling, and winter cross-country skiing. The land was first used in 1935 as a camp for the Civilian Conservation Corps, but was turned over to the state during World War II, making it the first state forest. It's obviously named to honor the country's first president, but there is no evidence that Washington had any connection to the area. As a matter of fact, he remained close to the coast during his visits to the state. I'll cover that in more detail in the next segment. The campground itself covers 100 acres and is comprised of 74 sites, which are mostly segregated by trees one from the other. 45 are standard gravel sites designated to accommodate RVs, in addition to tents, while another 17 are tent only. Of these, 7 are hike-ins along the Angel Loop Trail. Most accommodate up to 6 people, but only 2 tents, or 1 RV and 1 tent. There's 2 larger group camping areas that can host as many as 20 people per. Each site has a picnic table and fire ring. My site was on a small spur loop. It was plenty large enough and level. You should be aware that all of the sites are dry camping only, with no hookups. I feel the cost was reasonable at $18 a night for Rhode Island residents, or $36 for non-residents, plus an $8.75 reservation fee. You should know that I was charged the reservation fee for 2 nights, but I'd booked 3. I tried to figure it out, but decided to leave it alone. It wasn't worth the effort in any case. As of the recording of this in November 2025, the booking window for 2026 is open through the end of the season, from April 10 through October 30th. Many of the sites are still available for holiday weekends, but they're filling up fast. The campground also has 4 cabins available for rent and sleeps up to 6. These are $50 per night for residents and $75 for non-residents. Pets are allowed, but must be on a leash, not to exceed 8 feet, and they must be fully up to date on all vaccines. I'll tell you about the specific amenities in just a moment. But first, have you heard that George Washington slept around? If you're famous, people keep track of what you do, where you eat, and with whom you sleep. There were times when our first president was sleeping in a different bed every night. Okay, so it wasn't as sensational as all that. Over his lifetime, a tall Virginian made several ventures to the New England region. During the 7 Years' War, while on a trip to meet Massachusetts Governor William Shirley in 1756, Colonel Washington visited his childhood friend from Virginia, Colonel Melbone, who was residing in Newport, Rhode Island. During the War for Independence, Washington wintered in Cambridge, Massachusetts, while the British held siege of Boston in 1775-76. It was here that he took command of the army under a tree on the Common. His headquarters was later purchased by Nathan Appleton in 1843 as a wedding gift for his daughter Fanny, who married a 36-year-old professor at Harvard College. That academic would turn to poetry writing, creating works that gained national recognition, such as Evangeline, The Song of Hiawatha, and Paul Revere's Ride. His name was Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. Of course, Washington had been through the Nutmeg State when he was general, meeting with the French General Comte de Rochambeau in the house of Joseph Webb, Jr. for 5 nights in 1781. After being elected as the leader of the first nation in the world to attempt a democratic republic on a large scale, the president wanted to get out among the people who had put him in power. He also wanted a deeper understanding of the regions that he now represented. Despite having traveled a good deal as a military officer in both the French and Indian War and as the commander of the Continental Forces during the Revolution, he had experienced very little of the brand new country as a civilian. In the fall of 1789, having won the election the previous April, he set out to visit New England on a month-long tour. Connecticut, Massachusetts, and New Hampshire were a logical start, given that the new nation's capital at the time was in New York City. Martha didn't join him. She was setting up their home. He took with him a light carriage for longer trips, but was often seen atop a white charger, reminiscent of Blueskin, a favorite, and retired at Mount Vernon. During this trip, he visited Hartford, Connecticut, Boston, Massachusetts, and Portsmouth, New Hampshire, among other cities. In fact, he toured 60 towns in 19 days, and it's certain that he slept in many of them. There's the Samuel Taft House in Uxbridge, Mass., where Washington stayed on his tour. If you're in Newburyport, Mass., you can visit the house he slept in, since the old Tracy Mansion is the oldest part of the public library. If you want, however, you can actually sleep in the same room where the president laid his head. The small boutique hotel is located in Salem, Mass., but I personally wouldn't plan to come in October. That's a whole different trip. There are numerous houses that claim George Washington slept here. Many of them are unverifiable, however. And there's no evidence that he was ever unfaithful to Martha. While he never had any children, few would deny that he earned the title Father of our Country, having birthed this great nation. As I close out, there's one house in Hampton Falls, New Hampshire, where Washington spent the night as a guest of Governor Meshach Ware. The story goes that a toothache prevented the president from getting rest, and it can claim George Washington almost slept here. Now you know. During his tour of New England, President Washington was lauded with many dinners featuring some of the finest amenities. His namesake campground, however, is not quite as grand. Minimal would be the best word to describe the amenities at the campground. This isn't to say that they weren't clean and efficient. Centrally located within the campground, there's a fairly new facility which has flush toilets. Also is a counter with 2 sinks for things like washing hands, face, and brushing your teeth. There's also a hand dryer on the wall next to the corridor leading down to the 3 showers. The showers were coin operated, and these were hot, with the stalls being well maintained with sufficient hooks for clothes, as well as a fold-down seat for items or sitting if necessary. One of the stalls is large enough to meet ADA compliance, incorporating a handheld shower head and a lower nozzle. Each of the stalls offered plenty of privacy and security. Change is available from a machine near the front door, with the price of the shower being 25 cents per minute up to 32 minutes. Closer to the campsites are chemical toilets with solar lights for illumination after the sun goes down. Again, these were well stocked and as clean as one might expect. Certainly better maintained than some of the older pit toilets at state park campgrounds and other areas. Fresh water is available at spigots, likewise scattered throughout the campground, typically in the vicinity of the johns. A quick test showed that these also operated as expected. Some of the amenities not found here is a sink for cleaning dishes, nor does the campground sell firewood, although there were a number of roadside stands offering firewood using the honor system. I purchased a bundle from one of these locations and discovered it wasn't well seasoned, and, consequently, I couldn't get the fire to burn no matter what I tried. But my effort was only half-hearted, and I was very tired, so I went to bed. Buyer beware. I will confess that I selected this bundle from a stand that had the price cheaper than other locations. I left the wood behind when I departed. I hope the next camper had better luck than I did. The dumpsters were also well maintained, and the areas were clean and neat. There was also a separate bin for ashes, but I didn't see any disposal areas designated for empty 1-pound propane cylinders or butane tanks. For RVs, there's a dump station next to the shower facility and a dedicated RV fresh water spigot beside the road with a pullout to prevent blocking traffic. These amenities are free to campers staying within the park, but are prohibited to outside rigs. That's about it. I'll cover the recreational offerings in a moment, but first, let me tell you about a different George Washington who did sleep with someone famous. I hope you're enjoying this video, and thank you for watching, but I don't get any compensation for this. However, if you'd like, you could buy me a cup of coffee. I'll put the link in the description down below. Thank you. The American people loved our first president. Many actually named their children after him to honor his memory. Some of them became famous in their own right. George Washington Vanderbilt II constructed the Biltmore Estate in North Carolina. George Washington Gale Ferris Jr. built the carnival ride that bears his name. And George Washington Carver, an agricultural scientist, promoted crop rotation. Such is the case when Army officer and veteran of the American Revolution, actually having fought on both sides, John Whistler, had a fourth son in 1800 with his wife Anna Bishop, the daughter of an English gentleman. George would follow in his father's military footsteps, as did his brothers, and attend West Point, graduating in 1821 and being assigned to the artillery as a topography engineer. He would also serve for a bit as a second professor of drawing at West Point, and then worked to trace the boundary near Lake Superior. That same year, he married Mary Swift, the daughter of an Army surgeon and granddaughter of a Boston lawyer and associate of John Adams, who died while the city was besieged by the British. They were married just 6 short years when Mary passed away at age 23, having given GW 3 children. George threw himself into work for the Army and joined a fellow West Point graduate, William McNeil, on constructing the first railroad in America, the Baltimore and Ohio. This effort brought the two, along with 2 others, to England to study railway construction and building steam engines. It was George who oversaw the laying of the first mile of track, making him the first of the first. Following the success of the B&O, he was assigned to work with McNeil on several other rail projects. In 1831, George married William's sister, Anna. 2 years later, now First Lieutenant G.W. Whistler, resigned his commission in the Army and went to work for the Locks and Canal Company in Lowell, Massachusetts, as the superintendent of the machine shop. The focus was on building new canals to support the burgeoning mills by bypassing the Pawtucket Falls, harnessing the power of the Merrimack River that would help make the city famous. While in Massachusetts, he also worked for the Boston and Lowell Railroad. He worked to reverse engineer an English steam engine, the Stephenson's Planet locomotive, and began building these to use in the United States. During this time, George and Anna celebrated the birth of their first child, James. Upon completion of the project at Lowell, the family moved to Stonington, Connecticut. George next focused on building the Western Railroad, later named the Boston and Albany, where as construction engineer he surveyed and designed the first Keystone Arch bridges in America. When completed in 1841, this was the longest and highest railroad in the world. He next worked with his brother-in-law, William McNeill, to build the first ever Canton Viaduct as part of the Boston to Providence Railway, still in use today. This work caught the attention of the Tsar in 1842, who wanted to build a rail line from the capital at St. Petersburg to Moscow, which housed the recently upgraded Kremlin in its armory, a 400-mile straight line. Pavel Melnikov, the transport minister under Nicholas I, traveled to the United States to look at American railways and meet George and William, inviting them to help create the Royal Railway. Enticed by the project, they agreed, and GW packed Anna and the boys, James and William, named for his uncle, and went to live under the gendarme of Europe. There's a legend that the Tsar was so strict that when building the railway, he took a ruler and drew a straight line between the two cities, proclaiming that was the route to be laid. It's said, however, that the tip of his finger protruded slightly beyond the edge of the pencil line, reflecting a bump. So fearful of reprisal from the monarch, the engineers built the line straight as an arrow until they reached a location marked with a slight jog. Unwilling to tempt the Tsar's wrath, they built the line with the rounded bit and returned to the straight line after. In 2001, the bump was removed and thus eliminated the tale of the emperor giving the project the finger. I'll put a link in the description for the whole story. At some point during this process, George had achieved the rank of major, but it's unclear if he was involved with the reserve unit. Nevertheless, while in Russia, Major George Washington Whistler and Anna had another son, John Butatz, named for a fellow engineer and friend of George's. He lived just over a year. In 1847, the Major was awarded the Order of St. Anne for overseeing the project. But in 1849, George, now 49, contracted cholera and died, 2 years before the completion of the rail line. Anna took the family back to her hometown of Pomfret, Connecticut, just about 15.5 miles from where George Washington State Park is located. William went on to study medicine and became a medical officer in the Confederacy during the Civil War, during which time he slipped through enemy lines and brought correspondence to the British. He decided to stay abroad and became the senior physician at the London Throat Hospital and lived in the city for the remainder of his life. James, on the other hand, having failed at West Point, studied art, first in Paris, then he moved to London before William. Despite his lavish and bohemian lifestyle, the very proper and almost puritanical Anna came to live in London with James. During this period, the artist was experimenting with how light played in shadows of gray. Despite this George Washington's incredible achievements, history has mostly forgotten him, as he was eclipsed by the woman he slept with, as portrayed in an example of James's depiction of an array in gray and black number 1. Yes, this George Washington was Whistler's father. Now, you know. Let's finish up with what there is for recreation at Rhode Island's largest state park. The campground's primary recreational activity is the access to Botish Lake. Here, you can swim, boat, or fish. I was here in mid-May, so there wasn't very much swimming going on. And it should be noted that there's no lifeguard on duty. There's also a boat ramp available for launching smaller watercraft, such as canoes and kayaks, as well as small boats with a motor under 10 horsepower. The beach is accessed down the road next to the shower building and past the old CCC camp. A small parking lot is available for those who choose to drive down or if you've got a boat trailer. But parking is limited and driving down to swim is discouraged. Because the water is a reservoir, there is a number of restrictions about what you can't do along the beach, including no flotation devices, no ball playing, no grills or picnicking. Also, no animals, including dogs. By the trailhead next to the beach, there are composting toilets. And speaking of the trailhead, there are 3 hikes that run along the side of Botish Lake between 2, 6, and 8 miles. Each are clearly marked with a colored blaze. Running along the other side of the lake shore is the Angel Loop Trail. This is the access for campsites A1 through A7, which are carry-in, carry-out. Parking for the Angel Loop campsites is just beyond the trail's information sign. The old CCC cabin above the lake is marked as a nature hut, but I didn't see any activity there. There is, however, a CCC memorial out in front of the cabin. Included within the park, but not the campground, is the Pulaski Day Use Recreational Area. This also includes an area for swimming, fishing, and fields for games. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, please take a moment to give it a thumbs up. It just lets YouTube know that you like the content that I'm putting out. Consider becoming a subscriber. I put out a video every week about the camp gear that I use, places that I visit, and my Making a Mess series where I put together recipes using shelf-stable food with no refrigeration in my mess kit. Until next time, I hope you'll get outside, and thank you for watching.